Welcome back to the Invest in Yourself podcast. Today I'm joined by former mobster Louis Ferrante. Louis was an associate of the Gambino crime family. Louis was deeply involved with the mafia life. He was doing hijackings, robberies, and many more crimes we will discuss in today's video. Louis speaks on his stories about John Gotti, Peter Gotti, Sammy the Bull, and many more high-ranking mobsters in the 5 New York crime families. Louis would eventually land himself in prison for a number of years. He did run into a lot more of high-ranking mobsters while locked up. Louis also made up his mind while he was in prison that he wanted to leave the mafia life for good, but he wanted to do it his way and leave on good terms without becoming a government informant. Louis has many books, and I will put his new one in the video description below. I highly recommend it. He was so deeply involved with the mafia, there's a lot of first-hand information. Please subscribe to my channel for more interviews like this. Louis has got one great redemption story on top of all this, so sit back, relax, and enjoy, and let's get into this next episode. Good afternoon, Lou. Thank you for coming on my show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, Adrian.
Yeah, well, you got a really good redemption story. You know a lot about the mafia. You were an associate of the Gambino family. So, I mean, you were around a lot of different stuff. So I really wanted to have you come on and share your story and, of course, talk about your new book that just came out.
Gotti. Yeah, thanks, pal. I appreciate it. How's it going?
Oh, pretty good, man. What about you?
Good. I'm doing good. Thank you. I'm happy. It was a long journey. Last 7 years, I've been writing a trilogy. Nobody ever really wrote a really comprehensive history of the American mafia, how it all started in Sicily, how it came to the United States, how it grew. And even when you're on the streets, when you're committing crimes, you don't know your own history. Mm-hmm. No one knows their own real, what happened then and how we ended up here. And even John Gotti, the biggest mafia boss maybe of the 20th century, besides Al Capone, most known, I should say. And even he wouldn't have known the whole history of the mafia. So I really wanted to dig deep, and I did a lot of research. As you can see, I'm a big reader. I read hundreds of books about the mob, trying to figure out exactly how it all started. And I think I nailed it. Gotti, Volume 1 is out now. It's a history of the American mafia. And I think I got everything in there that basically tells how it all began.
Well, I mean, who better to hear it from than someone that was around that life and involved with it. And then, for you to go and do research and become a historian, of that life and be able to depict how they actually got here. That's pretty interesting because, we hear about all these, popular guys in that, or, informants or non-informants, bosses and stuff. But I mean, not really the early stuff that brought them here. You know what I mean? It's just something we don't hear about. So I think you covering that's a pretty damn good idea.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, well, to give people a little bit more background on you, we'll go into that, and then we'll cover your book as well. So we make sure to talk about that because the book sounds very interesting, and like you said, there's going to be 3 parts to this, right?
There is, yeah. It's a trilogy. So this is the first one. Begins in 1860s Sicily, and it comes over to America across the ocean. Picks up in America, and then we go in America from the early 1900s until 1960. When the Bobby Kennedy became Attorney General under his brother, President Kennedy. So it goes up until the Kennedy administration, which begins the second volume of the Gotti trilogy, and how the Kennedys were the first they launched the first concerted attack on the mob. The first real big punch, the real first big blow the mob ever received was from the Kennedy brothers.
That's true.
Yeah. Yep. And that's the second volume rather. And then the third volume is sort of my own time. So I know a lot of the people. I was around a lot of the people. I did time with a lot of the people who were involved, and I know the inside stories from people firsthand. So I have a lot of insights that I could add to that. Volume 3, which is sort of contemporary times as far as I was concerned, the 1980s and 90s. That sort of was my own era. And then I came home in 2003 from jail. So I've been home a while. I've done a lot since then. I hosted a show for Discovery Channel called Inside the Gangster's Code. I wrote a few books. My books have been translated into 20 languages. So I'm kind of I'd rather do this than that. And I'm much happier this way. And you don't have to worry about somebody banging down your door, in the middle of the night and arresting you, which is a lot better. And all the rats. I never ratted. So I just got tired of all the rats, and everybody was just always cooperating against other people. and selling out their mothers, and you're done. You get life sometimes, and somebody who killed 30 people just goes home. So I just didn't feel like there was anything in that life anymore for me.
When you were approached at a young age, that's when you got involved. I mean, when did you start seeing these mob guys around your time?
I started out as a car thief, and then I eventually ran a chop shop where I supplied all the parts for some body shops in Queens, auto body collision shops. They would give me a list of parts they needed. I'd go out, steal the cars. I put together a little crew that would steal them with me. And we were young, and then put together a chop shop. And then eventually I was in an auto body shop one day, and I realized that we were talking about these big toolboxes in the shop and how much they cost. And then the guy told me that a truck comes with those tools and sells them. They're Snap-on tool trucks, Matco, different tool trucks that we have like routes in the United States. And they told me like there's over $100,000 of stuff on the truck. So I felt like it was time to graduate to hijacking. So I kind of like left thieving cars and running a chop shop behind, and I started hijacking trucks. That was the first time I hijacked a truck. And then I felt like it was something quicker and more money. So I started hijacking more and more trucks. And then eventually you meet people on the street. People want to know what you're doing, who you're doing it with, and you make money with them too. So it sort of works for everybody. And then, you got a shot at getting in the mob. So that's like a big dream it was for me when I was young. Now I could get in the mob, I'll be a mobster. And it was something I wanted to be at that time. So I kept going. I put together a really great crew. We knocked off a lot of different heists, big heists and hijackings. We were taking trucks down left and right, sometimes out of Kennedy Airport. People don't realize that. My career got cut short early, but we took trucks out of Kennedy Airport. That's what John Gotti was doing on his way up.
That's true.
We were doing the same thing John was doing. It's just that, I got knocked early and went away early and was facing life early, whereas John just kept going. And, he was able to go all the way to the top. But during that time, thank God I did get pinched, when I did, because I had a lot of time to rethink my life and realize it wasn't how I was raised. My mother raised me right. My mother was a good woman, and my father, good people. They weren't crooks and criminals, and they tried their best. I was just a wild kid. So at some point I started to reevaluate my life and say, this is bullshit. What am I doing? I have no right to go and stick guns in people's faces. That's not something that, I wasn't raised to do that. And it's not right. It's not fair. It's not humane. It's disgusting. And I got to think about that when I was in jail, and I felt horrible about it. And then it's like, you're either going to kill yourself or you got to go on and do something with yourself. That's why I said, let me try to pick up the pieces and move on. And I started to read while I was in jail. My friend Fat George DeBello, who just passed away recently, he was the caretaker of John Gotti's social club in Queens. And I used to always like marvel at his new tattoos. He was tattooed from head to toe, and he was like, 400 or 500 pounds at one time. And so he had a lot of tattoos. And I'd say, what's this? What's that? And he used to have all these biblical verses. So I'd say to him, hey, George, you read the Bible. When I called him in jail, I said, you read the Bible? He said, yeah, I read now and then. So I asked him for books. He started sending me in books. And that's sort of how I started reading. I fell in love with books. And I read 18 hours a day in jail. And my day used to fly. I used to go by like that. Before I started reading, the days used to drag. You play spades, you play pinochle, you play gin rummy. You try to like just pass the day. You go in and out of the TV room. You cause some shit. People do that all the time. I didn't, but a lot of people like to cause shit with other people to make the day drag on, like some drama. I was totally like, just trying to just get by every day. And then at some point or another, when I found books, my days used to fly. And I would be like, okay, I found what I love. I'd pick up a book, I wake up 6 o'clock in the morning, make my bunk, and then put my nose in a book till like, lockdown. And then I'd read till 11, 12 o'clock at night, fall asleep with the book on my chest and start again in the morning. And I was finally giving myself the education that I desperately needed, that I never had before. That, you got to think too, when people are raising kids nowadays, I can't stress enough the importance of education and reading and stuff. Because my parents were good people. They were morally upright people. But had they known, they weren't educated, had they known to, maybe bring me to a library and show me, maybe read how important reading was, maybe I would have, I remember my mother did try, because my mother, one time she went to like a local, like a charity bazaar, and she won an encyclopedia set. And she was really thrilled because we didn't have money to buy me one. back then. So she had this. And so I grew up with that encyclopedia set, but really nobody ever like walked me through it. So it's important. If you read, there's so much to learn. I still do it. This is my library right here. One of my libraries.
Huge. One.
Yeah, one of my libraries. Yeah.
Jesus, man.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's sort of how I kind of like found what I felt like I was destined to do, which was eventually writing. And I found that through reading. And I just stress the importance of reading, which we don't do as a society as much as we should anymore. It's a fast world. Everybody's used to the quick tweet, the quick comment and stuff. And, at best you might see people reading, even magazines and newspapers are falling out of date. But pick up a book. Yeah, read a good book. Read about philosophy, read about science, read about history, read good biographies if you're interested in somebody. I always used to say to people too when I was in jail, if you're Italian, read about Garibaldi. If you're Black, read about Martin Luther King Jr. If you're Spanish, read about the conquest of Mexico. You may not want to, but it's an interesting, the Spanish Empire was incredible, at one point, Ferdinand and Isabella. So I would kind of like push history that was relevant to people's backgrounds a little, so they'd learn a little more about themselves, get them interested in something. Even if somebody was Asian, I'd even get them a book on Mao, on Zhou Enlai, on Chiang Kai-shek. Try to give them their own history to try to learn it. But I was always pushing books on people when I was in jail. I hope I helped a lot of people, hopefully. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, you eventually, wrote your book too. I mean, now you're writing a book about, Italian mob history. And so, I mean, that's kind of like your background. So that's what you're interested in now.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
But, so who was some of your influences back then, like in the mob, like the ones you can talk about, I suppose?
Who can I talk about? Wow. I mean, I was around some really big heavy hitters, and that reared me in that life that I got close with. I guess I could say, I've mentioned at other times without, I don't talk about crimes with people all the time. So a lot of people go, oh, well, he didn't commit any crimes with those people. But I never ratted. I'm not going to tell you all the crimes I committed with people. But I mean, I was in and out of my phone records, my telephone toll records. That was supplied in my case. They went back and forth to the Gotti house. John had an older brother, Pete Gotti, who was a captain in the family, eventually became the acting boss. He died now in jail. I was in and out of his house every day. And I'll give you an idea how close I was at that time, with that family. I was in the house when Pete Gotti, I was with Pete's son, and we were in the living room either eating Chinese or pizza or something. And Big Pete came home and he had visited a lawyer. And I said, why the long face, Pete? And who died? And basically the long face was because Sammy ratted on his brother, Sammy the Bull. So, and he said, my brother's dead. Sammy went bad. And I didn't believe it. I'm going to be honest with you. I was so immersed in that life, and I was such a true believer, and I had so much, every last whit of my being was invested in the future of that world. And, I had dedicated my whole life, every week and day. My whole life was a crime in progress, but I dedicated every week and day to being, to getting made. I wanted to get straightened out. I wanted to move up in the family. And then at some point I said, shit. First of all, I said, it can't be. There's no way he went bad. He must be planning to save John, go on the witness stand and, say I lied and cut John loose or something. My mind was going. And then when I realized it was true, it was the first time I started to realize that, it wasn't the world I thought it was. A lot of people say John Gotti ruined the life because he was too flamboyant. And there's some relevance to that because he was, and it caused a lot of attention. So it caused a lot of the, law enforcement agencies to go, we can't be embarrassed by this guy rubbing, thumbing his nose at us. Let's go get him. Right. And then, so there is some truth to that. But John Gotti, a guy like John Gotti would have came and went, and, they would have put him away, locked him up, and things would have eventually got back to normal. It's a guy like Sammy who really ruins the life because he puts away 30, 40, 50 guys. He testifies trial after trial after trial. He points fingers at his best friends and then decimates the whole Gambino crime family. So it's really the rats, and not to just pick on Sammy. There's a lot of them out there, but it's really the rats who just have destroyed what I feel was the life that I once believed in. And for the better. There was a lot of killing too. That's the other thing that destroyed it. I was always out to make a buck. I always wanted to make money. I was always trying to make money. And I thought that violence was sort of like something that you wanted to avoid. And especially is what we were doing. We were doing heists and stick ups, so you want to avoid violence. You don't want to hurt an innocent person. And even in the life, when you got a beef with somebody, I thought violence was something you wanted to avoid. And then if you got to do it, you do it. I wasn't adverse to violence. I was accused of a lot of violence. I wasn't scared of violence. I never backed down from violence, whether I was on the street or in jail. But it wasn't something that I went out and looked for and looked to hurt people. But a lot of those guys in the life, I understood when I was in jail with them that a lot of guys were looking to kill people, and a lot of times for no real reason. You was like, if somebody disappeared when I was on the street and you heard the guy was gone, he's gone. You just figured, all right, he made a mistake. He got out of line somewhere and he got what he had coming. But then I started to realize when I'm in jail and I'm starting to study law and I'm working on my case and I'm talking about other cases with a lot of the guys I'm with, I'm realizing that a lot of guys who died didn't have to die. And a lot of times it was over greed. They were trying to steal their company. They were trying to steal their wife. They were trying to steal, something they had, a loan shark book. They were trying to steal their Joker poker machine route. And I'm saying, son of a bitch, I was in a snake pit full of cobras. This is bullshit. This isn't what I signed on for. I understood if you got to go, you got to go. But I didn't believe in killing people for money. I wouldn't kill somebody for $1 billion. Mm-hmm.
I was going to add in. So, I mean, you were really around when I guess the mob was coming to its downfall, like the Gambino family in particular, and that was what, 90s or 90s is when it was 2000s.
I started hijacking trucks in the late 80s. So I ran a chop shop through high school. And then after high school, basically I went hard into hijacking. And then, so the late 80s is when I started to meet everybody coming around, and I went away in mid 94. So, it wasn't like I was out there for 30 years, like a guy like Sammy, where, he became the underboss. I was pretty much, my career was cut short, but in that short time, I can't even begin to tell you how many things I did. I every day was another crime. That's all I did my whole life. I never had a job. Yeah. I never punched a clock, never had a job, nothing. So, that's your whole waking life. And I've been on the lam a couple of times. I eventually got indicted by the Secret Service, the FBI, and the Nassau County Organized Crime Task Force. I've been investigated for a lot of things that I wasn't charged with. And some of the things I was charged with, I didn't even do. But I figured, if they got me for everything I did do, it's just, I'm doing better. Yeah. So, but basically, that was sort of my heyday. And when I was around was when everything was starting to fall apart. I felt like after Sammy went bad, and I was there for that. I was the first one to find out. I mean, literally, he left the lawyers, and I was the first guy to find out. After the lawyer told him, started to get out. But
that's what I was going to ask you is like, what when that information got out to all the guys in the Gambino family, what was going through their heads? Because you were around some of them.
A lot of guys knew they were dead. I'll tell you. So Joe Butch was a great guy. Joe Butch once said to me, Joe Butch had bought a beautiful mansion on the water, and Joe Butch was around. I'm sorry, not Joe Watts. Joe Watts.
Okay.
Joe Watts had bought a beautiful mansion on the water, and Joe Watts was showing me the house at one point, and he said, Sammy just took it away from me. Basically he knew that, Sammy was going to rat on him and he was in trouble with this, so a lot of people did know. And Joe Watts, by the way, all the things people have made some comments about Joe Watts, questioning his integrity. And I'm going to tell you, he's a man of men. Joe Watts was never a rat. I ended up living with him in jail for a while, and he was a good man. Never ratted, never snitched, could have easily snitched. So any rumors you ever hear about Joe Watts that I've seen around here and there, heard or saw online, it's not true. He was a man's man. Joe did his time. I think he just got out after a long time. But anyway, Joe Watts is an example of a guy who, his life was destroyed by Sammy, as were so many other guys. So there was a lot of guys weren't waiting to go away, knew they had trouble. Me, myself, that's why I confused it with Joe Butch. Joe Butch had told me, Joe Butch Correo, I was close with Joe Butch Correo, had a stepson who was a great guy, and I was close with him. And Joe Butch's stepson, we went to a ranch, a horse ranch in upstate New York, and I was at a table with Joe Butch, and I asked him about Sammy when Sammy became the underboss of the council. Yeah, I just made a passing remark. How is he? Good guy. And Joe gave me, like, he glared at me. And I just thought he was trying to tell me in his own way, stay away from him. You can't say that because you could get killed for that if the guy was just made the underboss of the council. Yeah, apparently Sammy was happy to kill anybody. He killed his friends, so why wouldn't he kill him? So he couldn't say that to me. And you just don't say those things. But he gave me the look where I knew, stay away from him. And I just figured it was because Sammy was treacherous. This is way before Sammy went bad. And I read later. What's that?
I was gonna say, were you seeing all these guys coming off the street then, like being arrested?
Well, when I was in jail, I started, I was away and I'm locked up with guys coming in left and right. So, at some point when I was doing my research for this trilogy that I wrote, the Borgata trilogy, I ended up coming across, which I didn't know, I came across an instance where Joe Butch apparently approached John Gotti in jail and said to him, outside of jail, and said, I believe Sammy's a rat. And then John dismissed it. John said, no, he's not. He's a good guy, and never told Sammy. And then Sammy and John apparently had the conversation in MCC where John said, Joe tried to, paint you as a rat, but I dismissed it. I didn't want to hear it. And then Sammy supposedly got mad and says, why didn't you tell me? I would have killed him. And then he became a rat. So, yeah. So, the question is, was he already? I don't know. But whatever the case was, he was basically the first of a lot of guys who went bad. Then you had Gas Pipe Casso, you had Little Al Diarco, you had a lot of guys that it came out that Gregory Scarpa was a rat for 30 years. So you had all these guys. And then I'm at that point, at some point I'm in jail and I'm going, son of a bitch, I'm here believing this life, willing to give my life for it. And all these guys were ratting. And I just was like blown away. I was like totally like, this ain't for me. These people are treacherous, and I wouldn't rat on. Look, if you're a citizen and you're driving down Main Street and you witness a bank robbery and the police asked you what happened, I'm fine with that citizen going, this is what happened. This is what I saw. This is everything. This is the license plate. You're a citizen. You didn't sign on. You didn't take an oath. You didn't swear allegiance to a bunch of friends. But if you go in and you try to rob that bank with that person and then you get caught coming out, keep your mouth shut. That's like, to me, that's like, honor among thieves. And that was gone. Nowadays, if you get caught, the automatic go-to is, why go to the pen if you could send a friend? Nobody wants to go anymore. So, but there were a lot of good guys I met in there that are doing life. Jimmy Ida. I left Jimmy Ida in Lewisburg. He was doing life. Michael Sessa's been away for 30 years. He's a man's man, Michael Sessa. Good guy. Little Vicarina Sr., he's doing life. Little Vicarina Jr. is a man's man. He just ducked doing life. I'm still friends with the Arenas after 30 years. Little Vicarina Jr. is one of my dearest friends. He was like an older brother to me when I was younger. And smart man, extremely intelligent. He saw no value in this shit. He left the life. He said, I'm a man's man. I'm going to always go away. So how can I win? And my father's doing life. He left. He said, I'll see you later. He packed it in, and he did it with honor. He didn't leave ratting with people and trying to get a better sentence and then leave. He did it where he said, I'm going to do my time. And he did like 10 years anyway, even though he ducked a major racketeering. He had a murder racketeering indictment he beat. But in the end, he did a lot of time and he said, I'm done with this. So there are some really good guys and, that held true to the code, but I just didn't believe it anymore. I didn't believe in it. And if you're going to rely on the 3 or 4 guys or the 30 or 40 out amongst 300 or 400 that are men, real men, you're going to lose. The odds are against you. Eventually somebody's going to give you up.
And that's what, yeah. So, you experienced a lot of that firsthand. And so like when you were out there, did you have any relationship or any encounters like with John Gotti that you could talk? Because he was another person that died in, prison.
Yeah. John was more removed. He was the boss. So it wasn't like you just go and say hello to John every day. I saw John Jr. mostly at the side club. There was another club around the corner from John Sr.'s club where John Jr. ran. I got along with John Jr. Hello and goodbye. And as I said, I was in Pete Gotti's house for the better part of like 6 or 7 years. But John was sort of removed. John was the boss. Even if you were a skipper, it's not like you could just go, I want to talk to John today. You got to send word. Can I see the boss? Or the boss has to send for you. It's a little different. When he was more local, like I mentioned Fat George DeBello earlier in the conversation, Fat George DeBello was around the Gotti Club in Ozone Park before John was anybody. And John was just a regular guy back then. It was a lot different. And then, but once he became the boss, he's the boss. It's like, he's elevated. It's like if you knew Donald Trump in Queens and you hung out with him maybe at a couple of nightclubs once in a while, and had a bottle of Moet or Cristal with him, that's great. But once he becomes the president, it's hard to get an invite to the Oval Office, or go see him. Yeah. So it's a little different. You could kind of get yeah.
So when you were in prison, like you said, you were experiencing all these feelings and these thoughts of like, man, I got to get out of this life. And I think in your book that I read, I mean, the moment that really made you like change was like this guy came up to you, like he might have been a lawyer or no, I think he would have been a guard, but you had pulled his tie or you were going to pull his tie. Yeah. And he's like, talk about that.
So I was in jail. So I'm starting to rethink the whole life to begin with. I'm like, this is bullshit. And then at some point or another, we were in a dormitory and some dude went on a visit and he came back. There was a hack who kept us from going on the visits. He kept us like, you got a little visit with your family once a week or every other week. And you look forward to it. And he kept us late from going down to the visits. So we all had like short visits with our family. So when I came up, there was an older dude in my row. And he was a Sicilian gangster. He might have been straightened out on this side of the ocean too, but he was a made guy from Sicily. And he picked up an apple and he threw it at the guard and it broke apart in the guard's head, the hack. And the guy, he hit the deuces or pulled the pin, whatever, the body alarm, and he called up. Goon squad comes up and he points to the row, and everybody in my row was a lot older than me. I'm 25, 26 at the time. And everybody in my row was like 65 or better. I was hanging out with the older guys. I got along with them. I always gravitated toward the older gangsters because they taught me, more than the younger guys could. Obviously, they had more experience. So he points to the row, and the goon squad figures the old men didn't do it. The kid did it. So they grabbed me. They roughed me up on the way to the hole. So in the hole, they said to me, they didn't give me my jumpsuit. So I'm naked in the hole at first. They finally gave me a jumpsuit. They wouldn't give me a mattress. I'm on a cold bunk. And then at some point, the lieutenant of the guards was coming by my cell and he said, who threw the apple? So the guy must not have been able to say that I definitively threw it. He must have just said it came from over there and they grabbed me. So now they want to know who did it. So he said, who threw the apple? You're going to sit in the hole until you tell us. I said, I don't know who threw the apple. No idea. He goes, it's an assault on a guard. You're going to be charged with the assault. I said, whatever, charge me. I don't give a shit. So he says, and every day he came back and he said, did you throw the apple? No. Who threw it then? And I was like, because it's a big deal for them. You can't assault a guard. They don't want guards being assaulted, and they got to come down hard on that. I get it. These guys live a tough life in there, a lot of them, and they aren't all bad, the hacks. I met some good hacks in there that really were. I was in a state joint where, your limit was 50 pounds of food, and Ronnie G used to send me 100 pounds, and the guard would just wink at me and give me the whole 100 pounds. So some of these guys are all right. They're not bad. They knew I wasn't looking for trouble, so they were like, why are you going to bust my balls, right? So P.S. getting back to the story, at one point or another, the lieutenant of the guards said, no food, hold off his food. We ain't giving him, miss a couple of meals, see what happens to you. So there was a Spanish guy who used to come out of his cell and he used to sweep the floor and like he was like the orderly before we'd lock in at night. He'd do a sweep and then a mop and then lock in. And, they might have given him maybe they gave him some extra stuff. He wasn't a rat or anything. He was a good guy. But, they might have given him some extra, either allowances, maybe a little rec deck time or something for that. So he came, I said, Venica, which was Italian for me. I didn't know how to say it in Spanish, Venica. So he comes over and I says, mangiare. And he goes, un momento. So he knew what I was saying. Mangiare was, manja, eat. I don't know. So he's, I don't know Spanish. So I'm doing Italian and Latin. It's Latin, right? So, most Spanish people pick up Italian and Italians pick up Spanish in a split second in the joint. I only know English and I knew the Italian from my family. That's it. So he comes by and he shoves bread under my door and he shoves some jellies under my door. So he fed me and he kept me going. So I was like, all right, this, I ain't putting up with this jerk. You don't want to feed me, don't feed me. The next day when he came around, he sort of like, there was a food slot and he opened the slot. He goes, you hungry or something? And he said something, I forget what he said to me now, but you're going to tell me something who threw the apple. And I said, no. And another thing. And I reached my hand through and I grabbed his tie and I wanted to slam his head against the door or strangle him. I was aggravated and I'm being charged with an assault that I didn't commit. So I figured I may as well commit one. And the tie came off and he goes, I said, it's a clip-on. I threw it back at him. And he says, yeah, of course it's a clip-on. You think we'd wear real ties with you animals in here? It was a clip-on tie. It came off. So I threw it back at him. And when he called me an animal, it was really the first like super enlightening moment when I said, son of a bitch, I am an animal. He's right. And, I never thought about it like that. I'm a barbarian. Not only am I in a prison, but I'm in a prison inside of a prison. And maybe I didn't do this, but I've done other things. So, do I belong here? Apparently God thinks so. I started to get a more of an understanding and a belief in God. So, God punishes you. Maybe sometimes God will punish you for X instead of Z, but you're being punished for something and you should think about it. So I started to think about my life while I was in that hole. And when I came out, it was a big change. I was like, I'm not going to rat. I'm still going to stand up. I don't believe in snitching still. That doesn't mean, I didn't change my mind as far as that's concerned. But I did have, I started to rethink who I was. And I said, I deserve to be punished. Who am I to snitch now and go out? And then just, I still deserve to be punished. I did the things I did. And I think accepting responsibility is one of the biggest things I did. All these books you see behind me that I've read, that came with the first step of toward reading was that responsibility that I accepted. By saying, I deserve to be here. Now I'm going to educate myself and try to become a better person. That led to the millions of books, the thousands and thousands of books I've read, to be quite literal. And the books that I've written, my last book, Mob Rules, was an international bestseller in 20 languages. And I'm hoping Borgata will be an international bestseller as well. That all came from, the first thing was accepting responsibility for who you are and what you've done. And I think we've lost that in society. Most people want to just push the buck on people. And we see our leaders doing it. Leaders are always going, it wasn't my fault. It wasn't me. It was the guy before me. It was the woman before me. It was the man before me. Everybody's always pushing the buck on somebody else. I think it's a big deal where if you accept responsibility and you take your own heat and then you move on, it's a big deal. That's how you move forward. The Greeks believed in wisdom through suffering. And I suffered a lot when I was in there. And I think that's where any wisdom I might have came from that.
How were you able to back away from the mob? Like, what was there any people pissed off?
Great question. I went straight up to them because people always ask me. I went straight up to them in jail, the bosses, the underbosses. I'm away with all the guys that are getting locked up and I said to them, listen, I'm in here with yous. If I got to do life, I'll do life. I got 3 cases. I'm facing life. I'll never snitch on nobody. But if I ever get out of here by some crazy chance, one day, 20 years from now, whatever, I'm done. I just want to be left alone. And they said, go for it. How are you going to, nowadays when everyone's ratting, how are you going to tell a guy, no, when he's not ratting and he's sitting next to you in jail and he's just saying to you, look, leave me alone. I want to be left alone. Leave me, I don't want to be bothered with this shit no more. That's basically what I did. So most of the guys I was with, if not all of them, respected that. And I was just in Staten Island for a month. And I bumped into a lot of guys, some active, some who left the life, but everybody had mad respect for me because they knew I did my time. I never snitched on nobody. And I don't believe in that life. I'll be the first to tell people, don't get involved in that shit. It's a waste of time, a waste of life. There are so many opportunities out there that are better than this. And if you think you belong to like some brotherhood and it's a bond and it's La Cosa Nostra and Omerta and that's all bullshit now anyway. Just go online and look at all the rats that are spewing, all day long. It's done. The life is done. That whole shit is done. It was, that's why I wrote a history about it, because it's history. And it's, it's interesting. It's a really interesting part of United States history as well, because the mob was embedded in like every single thing you could think of. He's I got one of my books right here. That's like the first one. When they really started to come up in the United States, and they got involved in all the unions, they got involved in garbage, they got involved in every type of industry you could think of, restaurants, funeral homes they bought, trucking, trucks that crisscrossed the United States, they had something to do with. So they really, really embedded themselves in every aspect of the American economy, which is fascinating. It was an incredible thing for a long time. But now I feel like just as society has sort of degenerated a little as a whole, we're not the society probably we once were, American society meaning. I think by the same token, the mob sort of like in tandem has sort of devolved as well.
Yeah, and I mean, they came over here, like you said, from Italy, Sicily, all that. They came over here, and some went to New York, some went to, Pittsburgh, some went, Florida, just everywhere. But they all had the same operations. I mean, they had the same mentality that they were going to extort, do the black hand stuff. Was that something you covered a lot in your book too? The black hand guys?
Yeah, I touched on the black hand really, really quickly, because it was sort of like the black hand was something that in the beginning a lot of people were confused by the secret society, the mafia. So a lot of people said, well, it's the black hand, but the black hand sort of was like this thing where it was sort of hijacked by a lot of people figuring if I send anybody a black hand extortion letter saying we're the black hand, we'll get you if you don't pay me. A lot of people started copying that. So it was never really like the hardcore mafia, the black hand. But what you said was really interesting, how you said they went to all these different cities. Mm-hmm. That fascinated me, how they spread out across the United States and just ended up in every metropolitan area that and I wanted to know why and how. Like, do you come here and you go, all right, I'm a mobster. Where should I go? Oh, go to Pittsburgh. We're a little short of guys over there. Like, how does it happen, right? So basically what happened was when the Italian immigrant wave from southern Italy, and I cover all this in the book in Borgata, when the Italian immigrant wave from Sicily came here, a lot of southern Italians were poor and they wanted a better opportunity, and they thought that they might have a future in America and they could give their children and grandchildren better lives. And most of the Italians that came here, 99.9% of them, were just hardworking people, honest, who just wanted an opportunity. They couldn't find those opportunities in Europe, and they wanted an opportunity to just work hard and give your children and grandchildren something more than they ever had. So most of them worked so hard that they dominated so many different industries, the Italians. The Italians, for example, dominated the waterfront, not because of the mob originally, but because the Italian work ethic and all the southern Italians that came here wanted to work so hard and give themselves a better shot, give their families a better shot, that they sort of were like indispensable to that industry. And everybody wanted to hire Italians. So like they bust their asses. We see that a lot now in this country, with a lot of times when people come over from South and Central America, look, I don't want to get into differences of opinion on immigration, but most of the South and Central Americans that come here, most of them want to just give their families a better life and work hard. And they bust their asses, and obviously then you get a few bad ones that come along with the pack. And that's what happened with the Italian immigration wave. It's a perfect example, because a lot of mobsters came along with that wave. And then they would sort of like say, okay, the Italians are breaking their back along the waterfront. I'm an Italian. Here's an opportunity for me to organize them into a union and control them, and sort of then in turn control the waterfront. So the innocent Italians were used sort of for their work ethic by these really bad ones who were just so, concrete, hard ass mobsters who wanted to just organize them. And that's basically how they got a foot into every industry. They were able to, and then if somebody bucked the system, they shot them, they killed them, whatever. So it's kind of like it mirrors a lot of all the immigrant waves that came here.
How did they collect on the money from these industries? What the mafia, like, how were they collecting any kind of amount of money? What were they doing?
Well, for example, a lot of the unions were infiltrated in the beginning by Jews, and then the Jews and the Italians partnered in a lot of the early union infiltration. And how it happened originally was Arnold Rothstein, who I talk about in my book, he was like one of the first guys who he had a great rapport on the street. He controlled a lot of the, he reared a lot of the gangsters. they were his, he was a mentor to a lot of the gangsters that we know of today, Frank Costello, Lucky Luciano, Vito Genovese. And I'm not telling you this because I have a hunch and it might be true. This from their own mouths, these gangsters, I found time and again where they said from their own mouths, Arnold Rothstein was a mentor to me. Arnold Rothstein taught me this. Arnold Rothstein taught me that. So at some point there was a union beef between management and labor. And they went to Rothstein to straighten out the beef. And Rothstein realized if I insert myself as a mediator and I could control, the scabs and management and labor and see how I could get them to come to an agreement by holding off the violence and stuff, stopping the picket lines or whatever, I could then make money. The unions will pay me. And then sometimes maybe the people who, the other side will pay me, labor will pay me, or the management will pay me. I can insert myself. And then once they realized that, they started to infiltrate all the unions. And once you got the unions, you control the unions, you control the industry. To this day, they had all the unions in the garment center, whether it be the umbrellas union, the cutters union, the trucking union, the milliners union, all the different aspects of clothing that had to be made were different unions. So if you could control, and then Lepke Buchalter, who was a Jew too, who partnered with Italians, he partnered with Albert Anastasia, he partnered with Lucky Luciano. He realized that if I can control the truckers, which was sometimes the smallest union, I can control everything because the truckers are the ones who bring stuff from A to B. So that's when the mob started to infiltrate the trucking industry, because they realized no matter what you make, let's say you're in Nebraska and you want to ship corn to New York.
Yeah.
Well, you can't ship corn without a truck, and maybe you could put it on a train, but for the most part, anything that goes on a truck had to go through the mob, and then they would control the industry. They could control the pricing. They could control who works for the industry. They could put me or my cousin, give us a good job. They could, once you have control of something, the waterfront, the same thing. How the mob infiltrated the fish market. South Street Seaport was completely controlled by the mob back then. And, the whole waterfront, New York, and all of that fish that would come in on sea vessels, fishing trawlers and stuff, day and night. If you don't get that fish to a wholesale refrigerator quick, the fish is going to rot on the pier. So the mob had tremendous control by just saying, look, if we stop the trucks for 2 hours, you're going to have a whole shitload of rotten fish on your waterfront, on your docks, and we'll stop the industry. If you want to keep the fish to go into the stores, to the restaurants, then you got to pay our truckers, and and then from there, they could pretty much control the whole industry. And then, that's how they would get a foothold in. And, that's something that's perishable. It rots really quick, but they did it with just about everything, and then they infiltrated, the mob, let's say Jimmy Hoffa, who I talk about in volume 2 of the Borgata trilogy. Jimmy Hoffa became the head of the Teamsters Union. And he's a likable guy, believe it or not. A lot of people, was he a criminal? Yeah, I think he did criminal things that he knew he had to compromise to run the Teamsters at that time, because it was so infested with mobsters that I believe Jimmy Hoffa had no choice but to engage in criminal activity at times. But for the most part, everything I read and learned about him, he loved his Teamsters, and he was 100% for them. But once the mob, who controlled the voting to put in the Teamster president, because they had controlled so many unions, so they controlled the vote, and each union gets a vote. And sometimes the mob put together these paper locals where you have this fake union. I create a paper local. For example, I create a union and I say, okay, Adrian, you're my friend. You're going to be the head of this union, but we really don't have any workers. But you're a registered union that has a vote when the president runs for the Teamsters. So, it's basically I'm controlling you. Then I say, hey, Adrian, do me a favor, vote for Jimmy Hoffa when he comes up. No problem, Lou. You're making $100,000 a year. You're fine with that. You're going to vote for Jimmy. So the mob controlled sort of how the vote would run, and then they put Jimmy Hoffa in. And then once they put him in, obviously, then he owes them. And then they started dipping into the Teamster pension fund. And, through all of that, I gave some really great new insights into what happened to him that, I talked to people that were still alive then for that one. Don't forget Jimmy Hoffa only disappeared in the 70s. It's not like that long ago. So there are people still around. So I got some great stuff for that. But
that'll be a good part 2 for it, because that's when everything was, the political people were getting involved for the early, the first part you're going to cover
Mhm.
them coming here, and then
Mhm.
the just at the end, as you said, that's when the Kennedys get involved. So then that's a good segue into part two. But now for your
Mhm.
part three one, where does that? You said that's where you
Yeah,
kind of come into.
yeah, I pick up in part three. I pick up with sort of like the Gotti era, and Gotti gas pipe Casso, Vic Amuso, who was gas pipes boss. He's still away. I think he's like 100 years old. Uh,
Yeah.
he's again in the world of the mob. He's a man's man. He did life. He's doing life. The Colombo War happened in my time. I was out there for the Colombo War when Little Vicarina and Carmine Persico warred over power, for control of the Colombo family. I have a lot of new insights for that. So that's sort of like my time. It's a lot of it's like the last of, I think before things quieted down, there was a lot of murders. There was a lot of killing. You had Roy DeMeo running around like a lunatic, killing everybody he could get his hands on. So you had a lot of murders. Gas Pipe, another one, he killed, who knows, 60, 80 people. Who knows how many people he killed. They had just gone wild. And what I think that was attributed to was basically they were seeing that, we got this, there was nothing more to grow. And when there's no more to grow, because you can't just go, I'm going to find a new opportunity here, I'm going to find a new opportunity there. So you got to you're fighting over the same things that are left over. So you're fighting over the leftover pizza, right? There's a big pizza. Everybody, there's a couple of people and there's a big pizza and everybody's gets a slice. And then there's one slice left and everybody's starving and everyone's on a lifeboat. And they're starting to look at each other, and the boat's rocking back and forth and everybody wants that slice and they're willing to kill each other for that slice. I think a lot of the killing was over that, just trying to make a grab for the last stuff that they were holding on to. And that's, they're not as powerful now as they ever, they're at their weakest now because they've lost a lot of the big things they had.
It's true. I mean, the way that you speak about all this is very passionate. Like you've done your research, you lived that life. So,
Mhm.
I mean, you could just go on and on and on for to continue to talk about it forever. I mean, that's why reading all these books that like you've read, you've been able to gain all this insight for this new book. I think it's going to be really interesting. This whole 3-part series or trilogy is what you referred to it as. So,
Mhm.
I mean, it's cool, man. I'd look forward to when these come out, and of course, I'd like to talk about each one of them when they come out, and
Yeah.
continue to hear more about your stories and your history and your insight, because there is probably a lot of inside information, even with this the third book that'll come out
Mhm.
with your personal insight, because
Mhm.
people are really interested to hear like the personal insight, because you provide something new
Mhm.
that people will
Mhm.
haven't heard. It's like a whole new story. I mean, it really is that, and it's like that's what they want to continue here. It's like it's insane how the whole mafia stuff still continues to
Mhm.
have this major interest on people. So, I
Mhm.
mean, what are your thoughts of like people with having so much interest in it still, and it's been years and years.
I mean, it's good for me because I know it. So I just wrote 3 books about it, so that's a good thing. It's good and bad. As long as people know it's accepted as entertainment, it's a good thing, right? It's fun. You watch it, you turn on TV, you watch either The Sopranos or Goodfellas or The Godfather, and you enjoy it and you get a lot out of it, right? That's great. But I just want to make sure, that it's sad when you get young guys coming up and maybe they're infatuated by it and they think it's
Absolutely.
something more than, yeah, that's the bad thing. Then you get people who go, wow, this is great. And then they see a lot of these rats that are on, online, and they made a living out of it. I killed 20 people, I killed 30 people, and now here I am, I'm free and I'm making money and this is great. And I'm promoting my, my this or my that. People might get misled into thinking that that's a good thing. When you're young and you're stupid and you don't know any better, like I was at one point, in my life. So, again, I just, I mean, if you know anybody who's like young and thinks that there's something sexy about it, let them know it ain't. I was in Lewisburg Penitentiary. People were murdered right there in the penitentiary with machetes. You could go online and see. I mean, like I landed there. I think it was 1997. I might accidentally said 98 in another interview, but I think it was 97. I landed there, and you could go online and look. I was designated there my first day in population, double homicide. That's real life. That's prison life. I had a show on Discovery Channel, Inside the Gangsters Code, too, where I tried to point that out. And one of the places I was in the Philippines, a couple of guys got killed right in front of us. We popped the camera out and filmed it, because they were dead already. So there's nothing we could do to help them, obviously. They were dead as dead. Their blood was literally like trickling through the crevices in the pavement. And that's gang life right there. That's gang life. That's real life. These two young guys are dead, and you see that everywhere you go. In that series, I locked up in maximum security prisons throughout the world.
I was going to say, what purpose do you want by sharing your story and doing interviews? And I suppose you've been doing it for a while. Like, what is your?
I stopped doing interviews a long time ago. I'm really just, I'm hoping that people read the book. It shows the history of the Italian-American mafia. It gives you the real history of how it all started. So my purpose now is just as a historian. I just would like, people to understand how it came about. If you're interested in that genre, you're interested in that sort of subject, this is the book for you. Tells you how it all came about from day one. I went deep into the archives. I went into feudal Sicily, to really, really dig deep and how it all started in Sicily and how it picked up in America. So this is the book for you. And that's been pretty much, the message. I'm coming at this now as a historian. I never wanted to promote gangsterism or anything. Even when I used to come on TV and stuff years ago, before I started writing these books and before I did Gangster Code for Discovery Channel, I tried to promote literacy. I tried to promote reading. It's something that I found in prison. So just positive stuff. Just do something positive with your life. Just don't make a dark turn into a dark alley, because it's going to be dark for a long time. And life is short. You don't have millions of years to correct things. We're here and gone. Even if you live to 100 years, it's a flash. It's in an instant. Your life is gone. So, you're here and gone. So make the best of your life. Do positive stuff. Try to make something of yourself, like what you're doing.
And that was I think you may have answered my next question. I was going to say, what would you tell yourself with the knowledge that you have today? Your younger self, maybe before getting involved with the mob.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I would go a different route. I obviously this was the trajectory that I can't change, but
Right.
I would definitely go a different route. I could have did so many other things. If I read all these books and put all that into, I could have been a lawyer. I could have been a doctor. I could have been an architect, an engineer. I could have ran a company, could have did whatever I wanted to do. And anybody out there who's listening to you can do whatever they want to do. Go pick up a book, learn about the subject you love, and go for it. Just do it. Don't talk about it. And, just some people get caught up sitting on their ass, maybe, online, hating people, bashing people. Go do something with yourself. Do something positive. Don't do something negative. Anytime you do something negative, you're only bringing negativity to yourself. So, just do things that are positive, and that's it.
Have you ever had to go and give any speeches to, at-risk criminals or back to old prisons and stuff?
Yeah, in Great Britain, in the UK, they used to bring me over now and then. So I went into a lot of prisons over in the UK. The US, unfortunately, we have a horrible prison system. We're doing nothing to correct it. And it's all talk. When we talk about correcting it, we never do. All it is basically herding sheep behind a fence. That's all we do, behind barbed wire fences and walls. And we really don't teach anybody how to get out of that vicious cycle of recidivism. And anytime I attempted to go into the United States prison system, the United States prisons, the jails, they didn't want to hear from me. We don't need you telling us anything. You were just a convict. Don't bother. We don't need your advice. So unfortunately, that's our attitude, and that's why the prison system grows and grows and grows in the United States. That's why we represent 5% of the world's population, and we lock up 25% of the world's prisoners for that reason, because we think we know everything. But unlike the UK, over in Great Britain, they wanted to hear me. They wanted to educate their prisoners. They wanted their prisoners to come home and not go back. So I thought that was really, really impressive to me when I was over there, that they had that outlook. And they were willing to listen to anybody who might help their prisoners who really are desperately looking for. Most guys in jail, they can walk around like tough guys all they want. A lot of them are just regular people inside, and it's a facade. They just want to do something with their lives, and they haven't had opportunities, and they don't know where to begin. Maybe they had a bad upbringing. Maybe the mother was a prostitute, the father was a junkie, and they never had an opportunity maybe to learn something, to have a different course in life. And if those people were given that opportunity while they're in jail and maybe provided with a reward for starting, to join a class, to do something, maybe they change their life, but we don't care. We just want to lock you up, go sit in your cell, shut your mouth. And when your time is up, you could get out. If you make a mistake, we'll keep you longer, like a disciplinary. But are you rewarded for good behavior? Are you rewarded for educating yourself? No, there's no rewards. You're going to get out when you get out. I did everything I could possibly do. When I left the feds, I went to the state. I had educated myself for 6.5 years. I land in the state. I go to a parole board as soon as I land there. They hit me at the board. How they hitting me? Why would they hit me at the board? They don't give a shit what I learned. They didn't care that I taught myself all the things I taught myself. I promise you, I could have went toe to toe with any one of those people on that parole board on Jeopardy. I would have beat them all in Jeopardy. On anything you would have did with me, anything if you would have pitched me up against them in any intellectual contest, I would have beat them. And they're keeping me in jail for no reason. So, not to pat myself on the back, but they're living regular lives. I'm in a prison cell educating myself. That's the only reason I say that. And but there you go. A lot of guys, they hit them at the board and they don't give them an opportunity to teach themselves something. We should be educating people when we have a hold of them. You got somebody in a prison cell, you're controlling that person's life when they eat, when they walk at the yard, when they got to go back from the yard. If you're in that much control over them, why not give them rewards for incentivize some type of educational process for them?
That's true.
Give them a break. Let them come home and then if they reoffend, then you know what? Then you got it coming. But a lot of times they go in the first time and they get 10, 15, 20 years. That's another thing too. How you put a guy's lights out? Some kid who sold drugs, for the first time. I'm not in favor of drug dealing. I never sold drugs. I never would. I had an uncle that was a junkie. My girlfriend's brother died, overdosed, young, very young, dropped dead, bang. I know plenty of people who overdosed. I know plenty of people who died from drugs. I know families who were destroyed from drugs. I'm not an advocate for drug dealing. I'm only saying that if some young kid is stupid enough to sell drugs, the first time he gets caught, a lot of times what they do is they go, okay, this is the amount of drugs you were selling. And here we take that and we put it against the guideline. Okay, 15 years, you're gone, or 25 years, or 40 years. I was in the feds with guys serving life, first offense. So give that kid the first time, give him 5 years. See if that kid wants to change his life around, his or her life around. Give him 5, give him 6. See if they want to change their life around in that time. If they don't, and you want to give them 1,000 the second time around, I'm fine with that. If they're that stupid and they want more of that, then give them more of that. But if they change their life around, give them a chance, for crying out loud. Give them an opportunity to change their life around. Help them. Reward them for trying to change their life around. And then give them, maybe 5 or 6 years the first time. But we have very, very strict laws. And a lot of guys, they get their lights put out. First time, done. So there's a lot of things. If anybody ever, believe me, I've tried to contact the BOP. I got tired in the past. I got tired of trying to reach out to them. But if anybody ever wanted to fix the prison system, I got a million different ways on how to do it. So, I wish maybe a big organization would contact me or a big institution and say, help us. Give us your ideas, because they're endless. And you could help people and you could get them a better life. Look, I did it. I did it myself, but I did it on my own. Unfortunately, I can't say I have anything to thank from them, because they did not, they did not push me to educate myself, and they don't. I wish they did.
I think you bring up some good points, man. There is a lot to say about everything that you said. You bring up some really good ideas about, criminal. I guess what would you call it? Like just incentives. While you're in prison, it's like you want to have some kind of incentive. If you do something good, you should get some kind of reward. But if you do something bad, they give you more time and stuff. So I think what you're saying is true. And you're someone that has lived that life. Been in prison for a good amount of time of your life. So if someone were to ever reach out, you'd have a hell of a lot of ideas, man, because you didn't go back to crime. you were able to make the change for yourself, whether you had their help or not. But there's other people that come out, no family, no money. Well, where are they going to go? What do you think they're going to get back into? And if they didn't learn anything, it's just going to add more. That's just going to add more to it. So
they don't have opportunities. They never gave themselves any. Yeah, it's sad.
Yeah.
But a lot of times it happens, and it's a lost life, and it's sad. I watch guys come home and go back in all these years, and I just had a friend who got out after 20-something years. I sent him commissary. I loved him. He was a great guy. I didn't meet a ton of like really close friends in there that I could say I wanted to stay in touch with. He was one of them. He came home. He was home a couple of years, and he's back. I don't know.
It's too bad. Yeah, well, I mean, it just goes to show. I mean, just whatever it may be. I don't know. You know what I mean? But I do appreciate you taking out, an hour of your time, and sharing your stories, because you got a lot of good points. You got a lot of mafia history, stuff to better prisons, share your life and how you've redemptioned yourself, and really just trying to make the best of your life. And because the way that you talk and everything, man, you just can go on and on about all these subjects. So you're very well educated, and you know how to speak. You're a great speaker. I could see you, even doing a podcast yourself, doing your own, because you could just go on and expand. And you're so well educated on the subjects that we've talked about today, man.
Thank you, Adrian. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks for your kind words.
Lewis has got a very powerful amount of knowledge about the mafia. He also got a great redemption story. He made a decision to get away from the mafia life, and he stuck with it. Anything is possible with the help of God. Lewis's book will be in the video description below. Please comment any key takeaways that you got from this video today. Also, please share it with anyone that you think will enjoy these type of interviews. Also, please be sure to subscribe to my channel for more interviews like this. A playlist of all my other mafia interviews will pop up at the end of this video. If you haven't seen all my other videos that I've done in the past, please check them out. All you got to do is click the channel icon and go to the Invest in Yourself podcast, and then go to playlist tab, and you can see all of my interviews that I've done. I got a lot of great interviews on there, so please check them out. And thank you so much again for watching.